Should the New York Mets target Sandy Alcantara to be their new ace? I'll talk about it on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now, if I was to ask you right now, who is the ace of the New York Mets, what would your answer be? Is it Kodai Senga or is it Sean Manaea? If it's not those two, I don't know who it could be. Right now, if the Mets had to roll out a playoff rotation, I really don't know who would take the ball in game 3 or game 4. I guess I lean David Peterson because they did this past year. But David Peterson, as much as I believe in him, that was the first time we really saw him pitch at that level for a full season. And it wasn't even a full season. His season got started at the end of May. So that's a question mark. Clay Holmes converting from reliever to starter. That's a question mark. Frankie Montas, can he be the guy he was in 2021 before his shoulder injury? Still to be determined. The New York Mets are still in need of frontline starting pitching, but at this point, it doesn't seem like they're going to get any right now. With that said, you still have to think about that possibility or maybe even a probability that they will be in the market to add an ace at the trade deadline, and it does make you wonder, should you just try to trade for one sooner than that? Sandy Alcantara is going to be on the market, and that is the point of this show today. Now, is he going to be on the market before the season? Not necessarily, which is where it seems like the Mets and the Marlins might be following similar timelines from where a trade would likely get made. Craig Mish, who covers the Marlins, has come out and reported that the Marlins are not planning to trade Sandy before opening day. And what I would say is anybody on the Marlins is for sale right now for the right price. But if they're going to deal him right now, they're going to want something close to what they expect they can get at the deadline, where Sandy Alcantara gets back to being himself coming off of a year lost due to Tommy John surgery. He would be, at the deadline, probably the top piece available across the board. If Sandy's himself again, every contender is going to want him because he, for one, is a legitimate ace. He's a workhorse and comes relatively cheap when you look at his contract compared to what pitchers are getting paid nowadays. But we're going to talk about the trade fit, what the mock trade might look like, when a trade can get done. We're going to go through all of that in the next couple segments. First and foremost, I just want to remind you how good this guy is because, yes, we've seen it as Mets fans. His first career shutout actually came against the Mets in 2019, and he needed just 89 pitches. We have watched Sandy deal against the Mets in the past, but it's been a little bit. So let me take you through his career. He was developed by the Cardinals, debuted with them out of the bullpen in 2017. He was then part of the Marcell Ozuna trade that sent Ozuna from the Marlins to the Cardinals. He made 6 starts at the end of the 2018 season. But his first full year came in 2019. That year, his rookie season, he pitched to a 3.88 ERA across 32 starts and 197 and a third innings pitched as a rookie. He was 2 2/3 away from 200 innings pitched in his first full big league season. He led the league with 2 shutouts, the first of which came against the Mets. And then he was solid again in 2020, made 7 starts, did win his first playoff start. I do not remember the Marlins beating the Cubs in a playoff series, but I guess they did. And then they lost to the Braves in the NLDS of the Mickey Mouse playoffs, and Sandy lost that second playoff start. But still, he was a very effective pitcher in that shortened season. Then in his second full big league season, 2021, he pitched to a 3.19 ERA across 205 and 2/3 innings pitched. 2022, you might remember, Sandy won the Cy Young. He pitched to a 2.28 ERA across 32 starts, led the league with 6 complete games, and also led the league with 228 and 2/3 innings pitched. If you are nearing 230 innings pitched in today's game, that's like throwing 270 back in the day. We just don't see that anymore. So it's an incredible feat for him to get to that many innings pitched. If you just look at what he did across that run, back-to-back 200 inning pitch seasons, back-to-back 200 strikeout seasons. If you look at what he did from 2019 through 2022, he led the league in innings pitched, all while pitching to a 3.07 ERA. Now, 2023 was a struggle for Sandy Alcantara. He pitched to a 4.14 ERA across 28 starts. The Marlins did not fare well in his starts. I was looking at that in market. I think they were like 11 and 17 in his 28 starts. He had a very DeGrom-like year where he got no run support, but also wasn't very good that season overall. I mean, to his standards, most guys give you a 4.14 ERA and get over 180 innings pitched and 28 starts. You're not mad at it, but this is a guy that was coming off a Cy Young season. Now, in retrospect, since he needed Tommy John surgery and they learned that he had the UCL tear in September, I think he did actually rehab and try to pitch through it, but just had to get shut down. If you really think about the season that he had, you might wonder now, was he maybe hurt and trying to pitch through some pain throughout that year? Considering the guy he has been, the workhorse that he is, I think that might be the case. So I wouldn't even really be too concerned with that ERA over 4. But looking at his career from 2019 through 2023, the only guy who threw more innings than him was Garrett Cole, and it was 18 more innings. So if Sandy had stayed healthy in September, he would have cleared him and been the pitcher who had worked the most across that, was that a 5-year span? And also, I will acknowledge too, Garrett Cole had 9 additional starts. So even throwing out the September side of it, which would have been 4 additional starts, imagine if Sandy had 9 more starts to work with because he missed a little bit of time in 2020. I'd imagine he probably got COVID. But this is the preeminent workhorse in Major League Baseball, a guy that can go out, eat innings, and pitch like an ace when he does. So this really is, I think, the best possible pitcher the Mets can trade for this year. Outside of Jacob deGrom coming home, the Rangers don't have a good season, and they're looking to move him at the deadline. That's the only other exception. Who else would be on the board that the Mets could nab that would be better than Sandy Alcantara at his best? I mean, Dylan Cease is on the board right now. He's a rental. So if you actually add that combination of it, it really does take it, through the roof. When you talk about age, Sandy's only 29 years old. I found out today that he is a week older than me to the day, September 7th, 1995 for Sandy. I'm September 14th, 1995. So only 29 years old. You look at the past performance, and then you look at the contract, which we're going to talk about in the next segment, but very affordable with 3 years of control. There is not a better pitcher that I think the Mets could trade over this calendar year. Right now, you're talking about the likes of Pablo Lopez, who once shared a rotation with Sandy, was clearly the number 2, or Luis Castillo. And I think the upside for Sandy is just so much higher. But again, to pull off this trade, you're either going to have to wow the Marlins right now, or you're going to have to wait until the deadline. Why are the Marlins so set on holding on to Sandy? I want to talk about that next. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. And it's not just the NFL playoffs. You got the NBA action going on right now, so pick your favorite player if you want to, and look at their stats for the game. Do you want to take their over on points, maybe their over on rebounds, assists, or combine all 3 into one parlay with the team winning? You can do all of that over at FanDuel. And also you can look at MLB futures right now. So maybe you want to bet on Juan Soto to win the MVP. You can find all of that at FanDuel. And remember, when you visit FanDuel.com and join today, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports when you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. We're getting closer and closer to our next goal of 12,000 subscribers. Appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. All right, so let's talk about Sandy Alcantara's contract first and foremost. He's due to make $17.3 million in 2025 and then make that same amount in 2026. So over the next 2 years, you're looking at $34.6 million for Sandy Alcantara. The Mets just gave Frankie Montas 2 years, $34 million. So it's almost the same deal over the next 2 years. Plus, you get a club option for 2027 at $21 million with a $2 million buyout. So all in, he's guaranteed $36.6 million if you factor in the first 2 years plus the buyout. And if you opt in, which why wouldn't you unless he's hurt, you're looking at 3 years, $55.6 million, with that last year being the one where, again, you can opt out of it at the $21 million. So overall, he's a steal compared to other pitchers of his caliber. Corbin Burns getting paid $35 million a year. Max Fried, what was it? 29, if I'm not mistaken. $29 million, I believe, off the top of my head. But it was around there, 29 to 30. You're looking at, the guys that the Mets could trade for. Pablo Lopez making $24 million in change. I think it's $24.15 million. I think he's got 3 years of that. Luis Castillo, same range, $24-25 million. So Sandy is cheaper, and he is, when healthy, better. And the question is the health, of course. But in September, Sandy had got himself back on the mound, threw a live BP, and touched 99. They shut him down because why have him pitch, in a game at the end of a lost season? It made no sense. But he did get himself to that point where he was throwing live batting practice at the end of the year and topping out at 99 again. He's had a healthy offseason. You can watch some bullpens of him that they've posted on social media. He looks good. I think he's going to be an absolute dog. Again, I think he's going to be one of the best pitchers in baseball, and the Marlins are banking on that. And they aren't necessarily in a position where they wouldn't consider trading him because, look, they just traded Jesus Luzardo. But the difference between Jesus Luzardo and Sandy Alcantara is Jesus Luzardo is also coming off an injury-plagued year, but he's always been hurt. Throughout his career, he's had one season where he's been completely healthy and taking his turn every fifth day throughout a whole season. That was 2023 when he did, pitch to a 3.58 ERA and got over 170 innings. But besides that, he only has one other year where he cleared 100 innings, and that was in 2022, and he cleared it by 1 out, 103rd innings pitch. So he's never been that healthy, steady workhorse. He's coming off a season where he made 12 starts, pitched to a 5 ERA. Jesus Luzardo was a much bigger risk to take into the season. So instead, they took what they could now, dealt him to the Phillies. With Sandy, this is the opportunity for them to get a franchise-altering package to really boost that farm system. You look at the Marlins big league roster right now, who else are they trading? At one point, I talked about Jesus Sanchez as a left-handed bat the Mets could pair with Starling Marte in a DH platoon. He might have a little bit of value, but not a ton. They already dealt Jake Berger. They traded Luis Ariz last year. They traded Jazz Chisholm last year. They really cleared the decks. They are sitting in a position right now where Sandy is their last meal ticket. He is their last chance to get a big prospect return. Otherwise, they are just drafting, signing, developing, and waiting out their farm system, hoping at some point it turns around to the level that they can actually contend in a very tough National League East. And I don't think they would really mind trading Sandy in division as long as the price is right. But for them, it's a much more attractive option to wait this thing out because they're banking on his upside, clearly. Also, they need to eat innings this year. And if you look at Fangraphs roster resource and see what their projected starting rotation is, you have Sandy as their ace, Ryan Weathers coming off a good year as the number 2, and then it drops off a cliff. They have Edward Cabrera, who's always been inconsistent, Max Meyer, who could be really good, but still hasn't established himself in the big leagues yet, and Volante Belloso. Other than that, they are really thin because they had Braxton Garrett. He literally just went down. The news came out, I think, last week that he needs Tommy John surgery. So he's done for 2025. Because of the timing of this thing, he might even be done for 2026. Yuri Perez is coming off Tommy John. He's their phenom. Came up in 2023, was unbelievable. But he had Tommy John surgery in April. So they're going to be cautious with him. Best case scenario for the Marlins, he makes a return in the second half, but they'll probably be really cautious and maybe not even have him pitch in the big leagues. They could just have him in the minor leagues rehabbing there, not wanting him to come up to the show and potentially hurt himself again in a more high pressurized situation. So Yuri Perez might be out for this year as well. So if you're the Marlins, you could think, all right, well, we can hope that Sandy boosts his trade value, but we could also get like 100 innings out of him before we deal him. So I think that's the most opportune thing for them right now. And I would say if you're the Mets at this point, you might want to see those 15 to 18 starts before the deadline to make sure that he is still the guy, especially when you consider what you're going to have to trade to get him. That's why I said these two teams, they're probably on a similar trade line for this, or trade line. That's a new combination of timeline and trade, but a similar timeline to make a deal like this, because the Mets are at a point right now where they probably want to see what their depth is this season. I think David Stearns is looking at the Mets rotation and said, all right, let's see what Sean Manaea is. Let's see if Kodai Senga has returned to ace form and is completely healthy. Let's watch our newest gambles. Can Clay Holmes be a starting pitcher? Will Frankie Montas have a bounce back season? Is David Peterson a lock to remain in the rotation start to finish? And if not, behind him and behind them, as far as that group of five, they have Griffin Canning. They have Paul Blackburn. They have Tyler McGill. Jose Buda is going to show up the spring training stretched out, though I think he's going to end up in the pen. They have Brandon Sproat, their top pitching prospect, who I think will make a big league impact this year. Is he going to be full go for the entire season? Likely not, but he should be able to make an impact at some point in time. I'm really trying to combine words today. In point. The bottom line is this is not likely to be a trade that happens right now, but let's just imagine it was. How much better would you feel about the Mets this season? And what would be the package it would take that would get the Marlins to say, you know what, this is too good to pass up. We're going to deal him now. And how would that change if both sides waited a couple of months? I'm going to go through that in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets Insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways. If you want to be a Locked On Mets Insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, let's talk about the trade package. What would it look like? If the Mets were to make this trade right now, they would have to get the Marlins 2 top 10 prospects in their system, because the Marlins are going to expect that they will get a return like that at the deadline. Now, Sandy ends up pitching to an ERA over 4 throughout the first half. Yes, that trade package is going to be a little bit lighter. But if Sandy pitches to a 2.2 ERA, he's an all-star. He's back to his old way as far as eating innings, and he's already at 130 innings without any signs of slowing down by the deadline. All of a sudden, you're looking at a guy that could fetch 2 top 10 prospects from any system, and the Marlins can pick which prospects those are. So I really think if you were to trade for him right now, you're going to need to give up 2 top 10 prospects, and you'd probably have to really wet the Marlins' whistle and give them your best overall prospect. I don't think you could pull off a trade like this without including Jet Williams. I really don't. Unless the Marlins love Carson Bench, and honestly, I think they had an opportunity to draft him that they did pick before the Mets, and they didn't take him, back in July. So I don't know why they would all of a sudden be that excited about Bench. I really think Jet is the guy that would have to go in this deal. The only other one to talk about is Jesus Baez, who is a 20-year-old shortstop prospect that has a lot of helium right now. I ranked him in my top 10 at the end of the season. I can't remember where it was. I think it was maybe 9. I have to go back and look at it because I haven't broke down my top 10 in a minute. That is probably going to be an episode we'll do at some point soon here, as looking for some stuff to talk about leading into the year before we get to spring training. Top 10 prospects, always a good way to spend a couple of shows. So I'm sure I will do that. And I'll give Baez another look, because Jesus Baez, I think he leapfrog over some of the other lower level shortstop prospects the Mets have. Certainly over Colin Houck, who had a rough first year after getting drafted in the first round. But I think Baez is going to be considered a better prospect by most outlets than Jeremy Rodriguez because he has power. He hit 10 home runs in Port St. Lucie. It's not an easy place to hit home runs through the humid air of the summer in that Florida State League. Had a 782 OPS, earned the promotion up to high A, and he was faring pretty well, had an OPS around the same level through 6 games, and then he tore his meniscus. But you're talking about a shortstop prospect that saw time at third base and second base with legit pop. That is one of these guys that has the opportunity or the ability to really skyrocket with another big season now that he is in the upper levels of the farm system, likely to start back out in high A again. But all of a sudden, one promotion, he's 20 years old in double A. And so that's the type of prospect that the Marlins would love to get their hands on. Right now, to trade Sandy, they might want both Jet Williams and Jesus Baez. That might be where they set their price, where they say, you know what, we're getting someone in Jet Williams that is pretty much a can't-miss big leaguer. How good he's going to be is to be determined, but he's going to be a big leaguer and has the ability to be your starting center fielder, ability to be your shortstop if you decide to move Xavier Edwards off of short to second base. Jet Williams would be obviously the crown jewel, but to get a Jesus Baez, that for the Marlins would be a really nice incentive to just decide to deal Sandy now because they'd be getting 2 top 10 prospects in the Mets system. Baseball America has Jesus Baez as the 3rd best prospect in the Mets system right now. They have, I think, Jet Williams 1, Brandon Sproat 2, although don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure I'm right there. And then Baez was 3. I was shocked when I saw that the other day. But he was. They have him above Luis Angel Acuna, above Ryan Clifford and Drew Gilbert, all of these other guys that you can look at, Jonah Tong. They really love them, some Jesus Baez. The Marlins do too. That would really move the needle in a trade, and I think you'd probably have to fill out the package with some other pieces. I'd imagine because they are so thin in their rotation, they would appreciate getting a depth arm. So Tyler McGill going the other way, getting a pitcher with 3 years of control that they can try to get a little bit more out of, or just give an opportunity to be in a rotation all year long. And man, McGill pitches himself out of Miami, but I think that's a piece they would like. They're pretty thin at catcher in their farm system, so maybe they would take a flyer on a Kevin Parada, a former top draft pick that they could just plug into their system, see what happens. I think that's probably the trade that might get the Marlins to move. But even that trade, it comes with so much questions that they, I'm sure, are going to view this from a glass half full approach as far as what Sandy's going to be. And they're going to think, yeah, well, Sandy's going to pitch to a 2-1, and we're going to deal him at the deadline for 2 top 10 prospects that we like more than Jet Williams and Jesus Baez. And then from the Mets side of things, you're giving up Jet Williams and Jesus Baez. You probably want to see Sandy pitch in a big league game again before you actually pull the trigger on that. So again, this is not something that I'm expecting to happen in spring training. I really am not. But this is the guy that I want the Mets to get at the deadline. And we have to see what he looks like. Obviously, that can change. But if you were thinking about who the Mets ace is come October, to me, if it ends up being Sandy Alcantara and they can go Sandy, Sean Manaea, Kodai Senga, 1 through 3 in their rotation, that's a playoff rotation that can go up against the best in the National League. But they're going to have to, I think, make a trade at this deadline. So this is something to keep in mind. And I also think from a Mets perspective, having Jet Williams go out and play, that's going to increase his trade value potentially too. Having Jesus Baez come off this knee injury and then get a chance to play a full season in Brooklyn, that could help his stock a little bit. So because the stock is down on a lot of the Mets top prospects that could be moved, because you could say the stock on Sandy is down a little bit. Again, these 2 teams do sort of line up well from when both of them would want to make this trade. But I just can't get my mind off of that idea, because this is the type of pitcher that you would get, and he'd be your clear-cut ace, and you'd have 2 more years of team control at an affordable rate where you could keep Sandy locked in. And if you wanted to, you can even talk about an extension after the season where you take those 2 years that are baked in, throw them out, and maybe come to terms on a more reasonable number across a longer term of years potentially, because he'd only be going into his age 30 season. You can maybe get a 5-year deal out of him, and instead of having to pay him $35 million like most of the top pitchers get when they hit free agency, maybe you could pay him $25 million a year over a longer term because he can lock in a number now instead of just sitting on the 2 years. But the bottom line is, this is probably the best pitcher with control that's going to be available at the deadline. And I am of the opinion right now the Mets are better suited saving their trade chips instead of wasting some on a Pablo Lopez or Luis Castillo, who I just don't think are the same level of impact pitcher as Sandy Alcantara. Now, Luis Castillo, I could see the case for him. Pablo Lopez is a very streaky pitcher. He's sort of a, first half he's great, second half he's bad, or the other way around. And last year in the second half, he was great. So if the Mets had gotten him last year, I mean, come October, he would have been a great piece to have. But because of the inconsistencies and the money that he's going to make, I wouldn't deal for him now when I can wait, see what this rotation with all the depth that I've built up has looked like, how it looks for the first couple months, see how bad you need the ace, see what your prospects do and which ones you might want to hang on to. You might watch Jet Williams play in Double-A and say, yeah, well, there's no way we're trading him. He's absolutely off the table. And in fact, he's going to be our center fielder, in the second half. So I think the time is not now to make a deal, but when the time is right, Sandy is right atop my list of arms that I hope the Mets could possibly land to really help them come October. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. I appreciate all of you for tuning in. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Not for your second watch. Head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel. Covers everything in the world of sports. We're talking about Locked On Sports today with our local hosts from each team, a league-wide host from each league. Find Locked On Sports today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.